Hi class, welcome to the last week of our Social Work 475 class, and I wanted to talk about 5 different things. So first of all, just to be again clear on the portfolio assignment, it is a cumulative assignment, and so each week stands alone. There's not something different that you hand in as the final portfolio version or complete portfolio version. It just has built on itself. So although if you don't believe that you fully answered the questions as well as you want to in the previous weeks, make sure you do that for this last piece that you're submitting. So wanted to just mention that. So this week there's a couple topics that I really want to highlight. One is the importance of considering grief interventions and how effective they are. I'm a big fan that we should not do things with people or to people unless we know that they work, and that I think it's a good idea is not a sufficient evaluation. So I've included a couple of articles for you to read about evaluating grief interventions. And I also want to say that in my experience and just in my work, people's grief is almost always normal. But for counselors and therapists who don't work with it very much, it looks really crazy and scary. And that's a therapist or counselor problem and not a grief person problem. And it, unfortunately, though, is what it does is it gets people labeled as having some kind of pathology when really what they have is normal grief. And grief is messy, it's chaotic, it's ugly, it's not neat, and there's no magic wand, and that can make professionals feel really helpless and like, well, since I can't do anything about this, it must mean that there's something wrong. No, it doesn't. So I worry about that, actually, that we label normal grief as things that follow people around, like it gets labeled as depression a lot, and there's a big difference between grief and depression. And really, if you've experienced some of the losses that people I've worked with have experienced, I don't know who wouldn't feel depressed. So anyway, something to think about is like, at what point does grief become a problem that needs to be solved? And if we're trying to solve grief, are our interventions effective? There's articles that address both of those points. So the first one is, how do we know if grief work is effective? What is effective with grieving people? And then the second thing is, there's a big controversy because grief got added to the DSM. And I put an article in there for you to read about it. And I'm inviting you to explore other articles, find other articles about this and both the pros and the cons of including grief in the DSM. And that's what the forum assignment is. We've just spent 4 weeks, the whole month of July, looking at normal grief and about grief. And I'm really interested in what you think. Should grief be included in the DSM? And if so, why? And if not, why not? So that's the forum assignment, is to explore that topic and share your thoughts and discuss those thoughts. The other thing that I also want to invite you to do this week, and I'd love to hear from you if you do this, is you've probably understood that one of the hardest things about grieving is that everybody else just goes back to their normal life. And there you are. You don't have normal life anymore, and it seems like everyone's just forgotten. And from the other side, people don't know what to say, and they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And, people worry like, oh, if I say something, am I going to remind the person of their loss? Well, like, they don't think about it all the time. So I'm going to invite you to reach out to somebody this week. This could be from a loss that's happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 5 weeks ago. I'm inviting you to send that person a card or make a phone call or send an email or stop by and simply let them know that their loss and their grief has not been forgotten. And that means so much to people, I have to tell you, it really does. They say, and I may have said this to you before, but a person dies twice. Once when they physically die, and once the last time someone says their name. So it's a way to bring someone back when you talk about them, when you say, hey, I have this memory of your son, and this is the crazy thing that we did, and I just wanted to tell you that and let you know that I haven't forgotten him, and that I haven't forgotten that that you live without him. So I invite you to do that. I invite you to reach out to somebody this week. And if you do, tell us about it on the forum as well. And the other thing I wanted to say is that grief is a hard thing. And it's a hard thing to work with people that are grieving, but it's also really transformative. Like, you learn, when you work with grieving parents like I have, you learn not to sweat the small stuff. And you learn what's a problem and what's not a problem. And in some ways it can sometimes I feel like I'm really, I don't know, not insensitive, but like what people think are really big problems, I think, oh my gosh, get a real problem. Have your child die, then you'll know what a real problem is. And of course I don't wish that on anybody, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, a real problem is not, oh, my computer crashed or something. It's like, yeah, that's an inconvenience. That's different than a real problem. And so that working in this field has been really life-changing for me. It has made me realize to treat people and life as being very precious and also temporary, and not to take any of it for granted. And to just, like I said, not sweat the small stuff. Like, this isn't a real problem. This is an inconvenience. And to really learn what the difference is between an inconvenience and a problem has been sort of a game changer for me. And I think when we choose to live a life that's transformed because of someone's death or because of someone's grief or because of experience, we give that meaning. And you're never glad that it happened, but it's like you honor someone or the loss of someone when you become different. When you become better because of what happened to them, it's a way of giving meaning to something that just feels meaningless. So I know a lot of times people will say to me, I don't know how you do that work. And, like, oh, you're so weird that you can do that work. And it's like an honor to do this kind of work and to be invited into people's lives. And it's a real privilege to always be reminded of what matters and what doesn't, and be invited to be different and be better. So I think of grief as something that invites transformation. And so in that way, it's positive. I wish no one ever had their heart broken, of course. But when it does happen, there is this growth that happens, and there's new literature about this, about grief as transformation and, basically the positives of grief. And of course, you'd never say that to someone who's grieving. Like, oh, well, you're going to be a better person because of this. It's like, yeah, don't say that. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that as well. So again, the portfolio is cumulative. I have a little note here that I'm referring to. Portfolio is cumulative, so don't think you have to do anything super duper for the last one. Just make sure you've got your 2 extra questions covered well. Interested in the forum of your thoughts about grief in the DSM, and also any reaching out you did. And then I also invite you to think about how do we evaluate grief work, and should we evaluate grief work, and why, and etc. And then I also just encourage you to think of grief not just as some horrible, terrible thing, although it is, but also as something that invites us to be transformed into different kind of people, maybe more sensitive, maybe better, but that it is transformative as well. So with that, thank you so much for taking this class, and for all your thoughtful comments and discussion and your portfolio assignments, and good luck this week and finishing summer school.